Oh, there we go. Hey, can everyone hear me?
Hey, Jamie.
Hey, Jake, how are you?
Good.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Oh, this is great. Oh, I see so many friendly faces. So yeah, we're gonna start a little late and give people time to trickle in from work and from everywhere. So there's no rush, just relax. And so the other person speaking is Jake Wolff. He's my colleague at UCF. He's
Hello.
also author of The History of Living Forever, which you should also buy. And yeah, thank you for coming.
Wow, everybody. All right. Hi again from Writer's Block Bookstore. We are at 100 participants. Super exciting. Once again, we're going to slowly go ahead and get started. Just to let you guys know, we are considering recording and uploading this for future replay. So if you feel uncomfortable, you can always just go ahead and not appear on the screen, or we can try and make sure that later tonight we will only have Jamie and Jake's faces on the screen for YouTube consumption. We're gonna continue to go ahead and let people in the room, but yeah, stay tuned.
What do you think, Jamie? Start in like a couple of minutes?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Did we hit 100 magically, or does Zoom cap at 100, I wonder?
Zoom does not cap at 100 for us. It's just a nice serendipitous number at the moment.
Excellent.
Okay, everybody. Welcome to the virtual book birthday launch of Jamie Poissant's Lake Life, his debut novel. Yay! On sale, of course, at Writer's Block Bookstore. He signed them all, y'all, and he didn't breathe on them. He had a mask on that day. And of course, in conversation with fellow colleague and friend Jake Wolff, we're hoping that this is going to be an exciting hour for y'all. Thank you so much for coming. If you would like to go ahead and purchase the book after the event, we are more than happy to ship it to you or specify as curbside pickup, and we'll run it out to you in front of the store. We're really excited to have y'all here, and once again, welcome. All right, Jake, take it away.
Thanks so much. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming to the launch party for this amazing debut novel, Lake Life, by David James Besant, who many of us know as Jamie. We have an awesome turnout, as we've all seen, exactly 100, which I'm just finding really extremely satisfying. I want to run down just a little bit of how the night will go. As you heard, I'm Jake Wolff. I'm a writer, and I'm a colleague of Jamie's at UCF. And I like to think that I'm a friend of Jamie's, though he has also named the absolutely most pretentious character in this novel after me. So we're going to get to the bottom of that tonight for sure. He claims that the character came before me, but I don't believe it. So we'll talk about that. But in all seriousness, I love this book, and I'm really grateful to Writer's Block and to Jamie for inviting me to be part of this event. In terms of how things will unfold, in just a minute, I will introduce Jamie to all of you, and then I will stop talking and let Jamie proceed with what is really the highlight of the night, which is him reading to you from this great new book. Once he's finished, Jamie and I will have a conversation about the book, for about 20 minutes or so, and I will aim to keep that conversation as spoiler-free as possible. Once we're finished with that conversation, we'll open things up to a more traditional Q&A, where any of you in the audience can ask Jamie whatever questions are on your mind. Even though we won't get to questions until that second half, feel free throughout the event to enter any questions you have into the chat, along with any comments you have about what you're hearing. I believe the fine folks at Writer's Block will be scanning those comments for me and helping me keep track of any good questions that are coming in. And we'll get to as many as we can in the second half of the night. Okay, so on to the good part. I'm guessing that most of you here are already familiar with the many accomplishments of David James Poissant, but let me tell you more about them, and then we can get him on the stage. So, David James Poissant is the author of The Heaven of Animals, in print in 5 languages, winner of the GLCA New Writers Award and a Florida Book Award, and a finalist for the PEN Bingham Prize and the LA Times Book Prize. His stories and essays have appeared in the Atlantic Monthly, the New York Times, One Story, Plowshares, the Southern Review, and in textbooks and anthologies, including New Stories from the South, Best New American Voices, and Best American Experimental Writing. He is the recipient of scholarships and fellowships from the Swanee, Breadloaf, Wesleyan, Longleaf, and Tin House Writers Conferences. He teaches in the MFA program at the University of Central Florida, and he lives in Orlando with his wife and daughters. His debut novel, Lake Life, is published by Simon & Schuster. Please welcome David James Poissant.
Thank you. This is surreal. I see we're up to 118 people. If you had trouble getting in, I apologize. They lifted the cap at 100. I think we broke Zoom, y'all. So that's a good thing. But it's fixed. So thank you for your patience trying to get in. I appreciate it. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, just sort of thumbs up if you can hear me. All right, good. Yeah, I feel either this is my book launch or I'm dead, because I have never seen this many friendly, beautiful, familiar faces in one place. I'm really emotional. This is great. So yeah, as Jake said, I'm going to just read from the novel, and then we'll have a real casual conversation. I did not name Jake after Jake. I would just like to say, in my defense, I started this book in 2010, long before I met the great Jake Wolff. But I do think the most pretentious description is apt. Anyway, I'm going to read the first chapter with a warning. It's a tough one. I almost thought about chickening out and reading a different chapter from the book, but I feel like the best way to read from a novel is to just read from the beginning. So I'm going to. There's 6 point of view characters in the novel, and the least pleasant of those is the eldest son in the family, whose name is Michael. And for some reason, I decided that this least pleasant voice would be the one to begin the novel with, because that's what sells books. So I'm going to read his chapter and hopefully not scare everyone away. And so this will be chapter 1 of Lake Life, and this is Michael's point of view. Chapter 1. The boy on the back of the boat, laughing. The sky, pewter-stamped and threatening rain. Michael Starling, age 33, warm on his father's boat, watches the other boat, the boy, the bay, the water that will never be his, because Michael's parents are selling the house. Yesterday, they arrived, Michael and Diane, Jake and Thad, and were given the news. Richard and Lisa Starling will not be retiring to the lake. In a week, the Starling family summer home will be sold so that Michael and Thad's parents may retire instead to a pocket of Florida shore that screams margaritas and sand and all things distinctly un-Starling. This decision, it's not like Michael's parents. They're not Florida people. They're ex-hippies, academics, lovers of cold mountain lakes and clear, cool streams. of trees that change color in the fall. Their summers are North Carolina summers, starry skies, and the converted double wide the family affectionately calls its cabin in the woods. What has become of Michael's parents? Who are these brave fools who splash before him, bobbing in swimsuits and inner tubes in the calm waters of a Lake Christopher summer day? On shore, a heron picks through reeds for fish. Above, clouds cover and uncover the sun. A morning on the lake, sandwiches, swimming. This was the family's plan before a rogue vessel arrived, unzipping the water behind it. Never mind the swimmers or the bay's enforced no-wake speed. The boat dropped anchor too close, and the man at the wheel uncovered his head and waved a captain's hat from the deck. He whooped, spat a wad of tobacco overboard, then turned up his music very, very loud. This is not good lake etiquette. This is not done. Lake Christopher is not a party lake, and this is not a noisy bay. Longtime residents work hard to keep it that way, having survived decades of development and two challenges, one public, one corporate, of eminent domain. The interloper boat blasts Jimmy Buffett, the party barge, stenciled pink on its side. Its pontoons gleam gray under a gray sky. Michael's father doesn't seem to mind. "Join us," he calls to the man with the captain's hat. Then everyone from the party barge is in the water. All but the boy. Swimmer's ear, his mother says, a shame. And his older sister left aboard to watch him. Soon, though, the sister is under the canopy, on her back on the deck of the boat, eyes closed and earbuds in. Michael watches the boy. He wants a drink. The boy's 4 or 5. Where the boy's biceps should be are pumpkin-colored water wings. He moves to the outboard motor, then straddles the cover, a jockey in silver swim trunks. His horse is tattooed Evinrude, his racetrack the sun-dappled water in his wake. "Giddy up," he screams. Someone might find this cute. Michael does not. The inflatables bulge like blood pressure cuffs around the boy's arms. One hand releases an invisible rein, and the boy minds a bag of Cheetos in his lap. He turns his head to observe his sister in the boat. His parents swimming 50 yards away. Michael follows the boy's line of sight. When he looks back, he finds a finger. It is a middle finger, the signature neon of Cheetos, and it is raised in Michael's direction. Michael shuts his eyes. Why is he watching over this child? He doesn't even like children. He opens his eyes, and the boy sticks out his tongue. "Hey," Michael wants to call to the negligent parents, "your shitty kid is giving me the finger, and your other shitty kid is asleep." Michael should be swimming, but his head has bats in it. Sobriety is wings in the skull, its echolocation behind the eyes. He needs vodka, now, but this morning he woke to an empty orange juice jug and no way to sneak liquor undetected onto the boat. His family will put up with a lot, but not vodka before noon. The boy raises the chip bag to his mouth, and his chin and chest are dusted orange. Then he drops the bag into the lake. He stares at Michael, daring him to speak. It's a new sensation, being bullied by a kid, and Michael can't say he cares for it. He cradles his head. He misses his liquor cabinet. He doesn't miss his house. He'd rather be here than back in Texas. He spent every summer on this lake since he was 2, and if there's a place he feels at peace, it's here. The boy draws himself to his knees and peers over the motor cover's edge. The boy's family, they aren't from here. Michael had them pegged for out-of-towners, but out-of-towners pilot marina rentals, and this is no marina rental. This pontoon is an Avalon Ambassador, $90,000 on a good day. A watercraft that makes the Starling's 6-seat fishing boat the seafaring equivalent of Tom Hanks' Castaway Raft. Michael's father christened their boat the Sea Cow. hand-painted the name on the gunwale in blue paint that 30 years later has faded. No, these people, the mother with her Dolce & Gabbana sunglasses, the father with his faux naval captain's cap, they aren't locals or vacationers. They're newly minted lake house owners, breaking in the captain's midlife crisis present to himself. Even as the ambassador entered the bay, the mother was probably cutting price tags from a stack of towels at her side. These are loud people who loudly flash their wealth around. To Michael, these people are everything that is wrong with America in 2018. Speakers thump, guitars strum, and for the love of all that is holy, would somebody get Jimmy Buffett a cheeseburger already? At the shoreline, the heron lunges and comes up with mud. On the other boat, the girl who's supposed to be watching her brother is definitely asleep. She's young, late teens, bikinied. She's roughly the age and shape Diane was when she met Michael here in this bay 15 summers ago. The boy on the back of the boat leaves his knees. He's squatting on the motor now. His sister shifts in sleep, and it occurs to Michael that these siblings are far enough apart in age that the boy might be a mistake. Perhaps the accident waiting to happen has been an accident all his life. The first one you smother, the others he's heard raise themselves. Michael doesn't want a first one, never did. That was their agreement. That was always the agreement. Diane floats on a raft in blue water, belly up. She won't show for a few weeks, though sometimes Michael swears he sees the hint of something, a contour. His wife isn't fat, but she's no longer the girl on the boat. He wishes she was, and wishing knows this makes him hashtag something or other. He doesn't want to be whatever wanting a fit young wife makes him, but wanting not to be won't ease the want. He misses youth, his own and his wife's. Does this make him sexist? His mother would say yes. His father would say no. Dad, his brother, wouldn't care, and Jake wouldn't know what Michael was talking about. Jake, Dad's rich, attractive boyfriend, is young. He's naive. He lives in New York and makes paintings for other rich, attractive people who live in New York. As far as Michael can tell, Jake's interest in other people extends only as far as the dollar signs attached to his canvases. In the water, Jake and Thad toss a football. Michael's father and the captain laugh. Their mothers tread water, talking, Diane between them, on her raft. The girl on the pontoon boat sits up. She says something to her brother that Michael can't make out over the Jimmy Buffett song. She pokes at her phone for a minute, then lowers the phone, lies down, and shuts her eyes. From her raft, Diane will not look at Michael. For 15 years, they were happy enough, content at least, before Diane upended everything. People change, she said, but Michael's not so sure. Did Diane change, or did she trick him? Is this what she wanted all along? Michael moves to his father's chair at the helm and flips on the fish finder. The depth here measures 60 feet. At the 50-foot mark, something big drifts gray across the screen. A catfish, maybe, or a tree branch settling into underwater rot. His mother adjusts her broad-brimmed sun hat. The cancer hat, she calls it, an attempt at levity that every time makes Michael cringe. Probably she's telling the other mother about the skin cancer she beat. Again, Michael thinks, Florida? Seriously? The bats in his head are cavorting. Soon his hands will shake. He really, really, really needs a drink. The boy perched on the motor flips him off again. The sister's earbuds have popped out and her mouth is slack with sleep. The bird in the weeds gives up and lifts off fishless. The boy watches, and Michael follows the boy's eyes following the bird. The boy smiles. He stands. Then he's overboard. His body tugs him under, and the water wings rocket from his arms like champagne corks. A hand breaks the surface, slaps, but the floats slither amphibious from his grasp. The hand does not break the surface a second time. And only Michael is seen. Seen the boy stand and fall, the seat of his swim trunks hitting the shell of the outboard motor hard, seen him slip over the side, seen in the eyes of the child water below and sun above, a transmission, one word telegraphed from boy to man, and that word was, please. Michael rises, kicks off his shoes, and sheds his shirt. He calls to the other, a cry he can't be sure is heard over the music blasting from the boat. He dives, he swims, he turns his face to take a breath and call for help, but he cannot stop. He cannot break his stride. No splashing ahead, no hands. 3 more strokes and Michael's close enough. He takes a breath and dives. He's seeking silver swim trunks, teeth, anything that might catch light in the belly of a lake. But 10 feet down, the light is scarce, the water turned to murk. He pinches his nose, pushes air from his ears to equalize the pressure. 15 feet, 20, blind but grasping water in fistfuls, but no boy. Come on. He tunnels, pulls. How deep is he? How fast does a body sink? The light is gone and the water grows colder the deeper he goes. Whatever happens, he must not lose track of up and down. In high school, he could hold his breath for a minute at a time, but high school was a long time ago. His ears throb. His lungs are lit coals. Wait too long, and he'll take a breath reflexively. He can't be underwater when that happens. He has to surface or drown, except a whisper, the dance of something just out of reach. Swim trunks fluttering, the pink of fingernails. Either the boy is below or Michael is already dead and dreaming this. Then he has the hand. He can't see it, can't make out the boy's hand in his own, but he has it. The hand is there, and it is good. It's a hand he can swim with. He'll rise and hold the hand and not let go. Later, in the hospital, he'll wonder. Say he'd had a drink that morning, just to calm him down. Say the shock of his parents' revelation, the house for sale, had not led him to drink so much the night before. He might have held on tighter, risen true, but that isn't what happens. What happens is that Michael kicks the boy. He doesn't mean to, but a body underwater isn't weightless, and swimming with one arm is hard to do. The boy's body drags, it is kicked, and just like that, the hand is gone. He exhales, but there's no air left to leave his lungs. He's swimming the wrong way. The boy is below. Why then does he rise? He cannot rise without the child. He has to turn back, but his body will not let him. Something in Michael has taken over, and that something in him wants to live. He kicks and claws, but there's no light. Impossible to gauge direction without the compass of the sun. Then a vague illumination, an object passing overhead. He's heard stories, catfish the size of zeppelins, sturgeon armored like gators 10 feet long. Unless the thing he sees is his soul rising, leaving him behind. No, he is alive. He lives and he is swimming. The fish or soul, it grows and he swims toward it. He's lost all sense of distance, space, and time. All dimensions are water. Fireworks go off behind his eyes and a siren screams for him to breathe. Breathe then, he thinks. Join the boy. Be done with this. Except that Michael's life is not his own. He is going to be a father. His life is marked by that which is in bloom. This truth hits him with a force so great he hardly notices his head striking the bottom of the boat. All is water, then light, then air. He coughs, gasps, and throws up. He breathes. Above him, the girl is screaming. Her brother is at the bottom of the lake. Surely, by now he rests. Surely he's stopped fighting, stopped water calling his sister's name. Michael tastes salt. The salt is blood, and the blood is his. He cannot dive. He dives again, and he will die. He is a father. His life is not his own. Beyond the boat, others fling themselves from rafts and swim to him. And in the distance, wings, severed from their body, spin, orange and current caught. They orbit each other, knowing. They tumble, ocular, with water's awful wink. Thank you.
Wow, Jamie. I feel like the appropriate response to that reading is a very long period of reverent silence. But I think people will think their computers have frozen. So I'm going to reluctantly start talking and ask you a little bit about this incredible book that you've just shared the first chapter of. The book makes a lot of really interesting structural choices that I want to talk to you about in a really nerdy way. But let's start with what you've just read, since you've just shared that really powerful opening chapter. I'm wondering if that tragic event is how you always conceived of the novel beginning, and I'm wondering if that's actually the first chapter that you did indeed write for the book.
That's a great question. That was always going to be part of the book, and it was never going to be the beginning. So that this book had 3 editors, and I'm not sure which of them is here. They might all be here. I hope they are. One of the first editor, Millicent Bennett, who published the first collection and who worked with me on the first draft of this novel. I finished the first draft for her in 2014, and originally the novel took place over 4 days at this lake. And the first day was just all the family arriving, as in a movie. Everybody just comes to the lake house, and then the turning point was this scene, chapter 1, that in the first draft was chapter 11, and this boy drowns, and that kind of sets the week in motion. And Millicent and I were talking about it, and she said, what if the book just started on day 2? Like, there's nothing interesting that happens on day 1. And she was right, and I cried, and then I threw away 110 pages, which was literally everything that had sold the book in the first place. But doing that really just, it flipped some switch, and then the novel worked. And I was able to find my way forward, because everything I had spent the first day writing about these characters was really just what I needed to know to figure out who they were, nothing that their reader should have to endure. And once the boy drowned, then I could sort of move in backstory into the lives of these characters. So we decided to kind of begin the book with this more explosive beginning. And the beginning did begin in my imagination in about 2008 or 9. I did not see this happen, but I saw the capacity for this to happen. It was actually scarier what I saw. It was on the 4th of July, and there were about 100 boats that had gone to see these fireworks on a lake in South Georgia. And late at night, racing away from the fireworks, all these boats, there was a little boy, like on the very back of the boat. He was well younger than swimming age. I don't remember if he actually had water wings, but I remember looking at him and thinking, if he slips off that boat, he will drown, and all these other boats will run him over. And luckily, just as I noticed him, a police boat noticed him, and they pulled that boat over, and so the boy was fine. But that haunted me for years. I kept thinking, what if I had witnessed this? What would my obligation have been? What would I have done? Would I have jumped into the water? I hope I would have, but I don't think I could have saved him in the dark. So yeah, it was just something that bothered me until I had to write about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I was wondering about that opening, partly because I'm just obsessed with openings generally. But I'm just starting a new book project myself. And one thing that I'd forgotten was when you're first starting a new thing, how phony and fake it all feels, because you don't really know these characters, they're not real to you yet, and it all just feels sort of self-conscious, like you just like come to a party where you don't know anybody. And we think about, I think, these sort of big inciting events in a story, these kind of big, like we call them hooks, right? Like you're trying to hook the reader. And I've been wondering if there's an element as well of writers needing to hook themselves. Like you're just sort of meeting these people, and you need this big kind of, like, in this case, really tragic event. Obviously, you're a father yourself, to kind of like slap yourself awake a little bit and really start feeling something with these characters as a way to get to know them. Does that make any kind of sense? Is there any truth to that for you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And what's interesting is, so these characters began for me about 15 years ago. They appear in two of the stories in my first collection.
Mm-hmm.
And when I sat down to write about them, this novel takes place 30 years after the stories. I thought it would be easy because I already knew them. You know, it wasn't a party where I didn't know it. These were friends, old friends. And trying to write them now that they were in their 60s and 70s, they were strangers, and they became the mother and father who I began the novel for, became for me the hardest characters to write. And so something about meeting those newer, younger people, the children in the family, I don't know, I got excited to write about new characters. So but I think we all have, obviously, whatever tricks it takes to get stuff down on the page. I always try to tell my students, my teaching mantra is that doctor's creed of first do no harm. I try to say, anything I say, if it makes your writing worse, don't do it.
Right. So like I'm kind of imagining you now, you've written this really intense scene. You feel like it's kind of unlocked a little bit of something for you in the book. As people are reading the book, they'll find that the book has 6 point of view characters, right? We just met Michael. We saw the first chapter through his point of view. The book also has the points of view of his parents, Lisa and Richard, his younger brother Thad, and then Michael and Thad both have partners, and we get their points of view as well. Does it feel fair to say that the book does not have an individual main character, that it's about the family as a whole? Does that seem true?
Yeah, absolutely. That was my goal. I intended for the book to feel equally weighted among all the characters. I think I lean on the brothers a bit more. I think Thad and Michael probably have the most page time, but overall, it was really important to me to try to balance all the characters, to let them each see the story kind of subjectively from their point of view, and have their own kind of understanding of why things are the way they are. And then it was also, the other particular challenge of that was, I, for whatever reason, really wanted to get every character in scene with every other character. So in the first draft, there was not a scene between the partners, between Jake and Diane. I didn't think they had anything to say to each other. And then it became really interesting to me to think about how that relationship is one of the most unique, because they're the only two that don't have to be there. They're not related to these people. They're choosing to be there, and they had that in common. And also the fact that Jake is an artist and Diane is an art teacher and would love, to trade places with him. And he's someone who doesn't appreciate what he has. So forcing the characters into scene created new tensions and conflicts that I hadn't imagined until I kind of put them in a room together and started making them talk. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I mean, it seemed to me, I think this is true of a lot of your work, a lot of the stories in your collection as well. It seems like a lot of what you're thinking about in your work is truth-telling, is characters who aren't being honest with people. This is really, I think, for me, was a book about secrets. All of these characters are keeping secrets from each other. Obviously, the audience just heard, just in the first chapter, that Michael has a couple, right? He and Diane are pregnant and haven't told anybody. And also he has this alcohol dependency that he at least believes that he is hiding successfully from everyone. And of course, secrets require other people, right? So to me, part of what was so beautiful about the book was these kind of little webs you form between these characters, where some of them know some things about each other and some of them don't know other things about each other. And you sort of see this little tapestry unfold over who has the truth and who doesn't, and what happens when it gets revealed. You mentioned Thad and Michael maybe having a little bit more textual space in the book. I thought a lot about how you've composed these chapters in terms of the order of them, whose point of view we get in certain points. I'm wondering, it seemed sort of how conscious were you of, okay, I've done 3 Michael chapters, so I need to make sure I do a Richard chapter. Was that kind of on your mind in a self-conscious way, or are you sort of like letting it happen as you went?
Yeah. So yeah, to speak to the first thing you said about secrets, I absolutely agree. The my third editor, my final editor, Sean Manning, who's amazing. He and I, one of the temporary titles for the novel was actually Open Secrets, until we both realized it was an Alice Munro book, because she's the best. She gets all the good titles first. So that did not become my title. Yeah, yeah, so the order of that, yeah, that was, this book took me longer than it should have, just because it's my first novel and I was figuring things out, and I think I made it overly complicated for myself with 6 points of view, and trying to figure out how many days that the story would span. But yeah, trying to figure out the order of who should best tell the scene. For the drowning, it was always going to be Michael's chapter, because he's the one who jumps in and saves him. But for other chapters, it was tough. I lingered, and there were versions of this novel where there were chapters where the narrator was omniscient, and there were chapters where there was sort of a roving limited omniscience that jumped back and forth between multiple characters. And finally, Sean and I really decided it would read much more cleanly and easily if each chapter belonged to a character and you were clearly in a character's head. And I think that was such a good choice. Once we did that, like, the book felt like it had a structure or a plan, even though it wasn't planned. It was in the writing of it. It felt like I was just sort of feeling my way through the dark. But in revision now, it looks like there was at least some sort of planning going on.
Yeah, I mean, my reaction to the book when I was reading it, obviously a danger of a book with 6 point of views is it can feel overwhelming for a reader or disjointed in some sort of way. And my reaction to the book really very early on was that it feels kind of remarkably well balanced. You do a smart thing in the first 6 chapters where you go boom, 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 and you hit all the point of view characters once. From that point forward, there's less of that sort of like schematic order to it. But it sort of like pulls people back in just when you're starting to lose them a little bit. Do you know off the top of your head how many sections each character gets?
I have it in a notebook somewhere. Yeah, because it kept changing in revision. I do know there were a couple chapters that were written in revision, because I realized at one point, like, oh, there was a whole day where we didn't even see Richard. So I had to find things for these characters to do without it hopefully feeling like it was introduced too inorganically. But yeah, it was really important to me that we not go too long without hearing from someone, seeing the world through their eyes. But yeah, that was the challenge, with 6 voices and making sure they all sounded at least somewhat unique to those characters.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things I did when I finished it, because I was just sort of in awe of the efficiency of it, was just went through and counted, how many were there and when did they happen, and just the symmetry of it is beautiful. You have 8 sections each of the 2 sons. You have 7 sections each of the 2 parents, and then you have 5 sections each of the 2 partners, which feels sort of this little kind of beautiful pyramid of importance, right? Where the sons are a little bit more central to the book, and then filtering out to the parents, and then finally the partners. But one of the really cool things that you do as a way to provide even more balance, but also some kind of unexpectedness, is sometimes whatever's happening in the moment in the story, you don't actually go to the point of view that you might expect. So for example, I won't spoil anything. There's a very important scene later in the book where they're all in a hospital, and something really important is happening for the family, but you put it in Jake's point of view, this sort of outsider person who's kind of like overwhelmed by the emotion and is kind of actually trying to stay out of it. And I thought that was such an interesting way for you to, again, kind of complete the portrait of this family, and to sometimes make us feel like, as readers, we're starlings ourselves, we're really in this family, and sometimes make us feel a little bit kind of locked out in a deliberate way, right? And again, tying into that idea of secrets, I just thought it was so interesting and so beautifully done.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. That's really kind of you.
Was there a character that you particularly identified with, even if there's not a main character, one that you was like, oh, that's kind of the most me, or the one that I feel the most for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be the brothers. I mean, Michael is the most difficult, but I love writing, what other people would call unlikable characters. So he's pretty nasty in a lot of places, and I had kind of fun with that nastiness. But Thad for me is kind of the heart of the novel. His brother. There's a lot of me in Thad, and a lot of one of my best friends in Thad, and I think that he's a composite of my friend and I in a way that yeah, I think I identify with a lot of what he goes through in the world. Yeah, and then I think for me the hardest character to write was Richard, which was weird because both the stories I had written, Darlings, were originally from his point of view, but as he gets older and he gets crankier and he's truly become like the kind of absent-minded professor, and he's making these life choices that are complicated and difficult to understand. I couldn't for a long time figure out why he was the way he was, why he had done this secret thing that he did, and I was so mad at him for doing it. I didn't like him, and I can't really write a character well if I dislike them. I have to find a way to at least empathize with their choices, and so ultimately, my strategy was to kind of over intellectualize him in a way that, meaning if I could allow him to kind of intellectualize his choices, then I could have sort of, a pity for him that he needed more self-awareness than I originally thought. And once I began to help him see what his flaws were, I liked him more, that he was able to admit that he'd done some things that he regretted.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying so fits with how the book progresses, because the first half of the book, if it belongs to any one character, it actually belongs to Thad. He has the most sections in the first half. I think he gets his 5th section before Michael gets his 3rd. So it's almost like this character that you felt a little bit closer to and a little bit more yourself was sort of like this gentle entryway. And then a character like Richard, who you had a harder time with, he really comes in much more at the end. It's like once you figured it all out, you sort of went and you allowed Richard to come in and sort of have his voice and have his say. So I think that kind of fits beautifully with the way the book actually unfolds. The book, the other kind of interesting structural thing, which you mentioned earlier on, is that it has 4 sections. But it takes place over just 3 days. Specifically, it takes place over a weekend, a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday. It's told in present tense. What appealed to you about using a novel to address that sort of almost like short story-like time frame? What drew you to that, and was that always part of the idea?
Yeah, that was always part of the idea. And the novel I'm working on now and other ideas I have, I seem just to be obsessed with compression. I love, I love Ulysses. I love Mrs. Dalloway is probably my favorite novel after A Great Gatsby. I love Michael Cunningham's novel By Nightfall and Ian McEwan's Saturday. I really enjoy these compressed novels over a very small amount of time. So I always thought the book would take place over 3 or 4 days. It just felt like enough. And also, if you put family together for more than 3 or 4 days, then it's just gonna it's gonna go off the rails. And I felt like there was already enough conflict in this novel. I didn't need to drag it out for much longer.
Yeah, I mean, it's just speaking about your work generally. To me, I've always seen you as just one of the most efficient and precise writers I've ever read. Your work is so lean and mean. And part of what was, even knowing that about you, still felt shocking reading the book was how completely you were able to carry that over to a novel. It was frankly annoying. My own work gets so flabby in novel form. The book is so precise and so lean and mean, which I think is extra impressive because you are not a minimalist at the sentence level. You know, you're not like a Carver-esque sort of, he sat at the table was round sort of writer. I think your southernness as a writer comes out the most in your descriptions. You like the longer kind of romantic descriptions of the natural world. The book isn't super long, but it's also not super short. And yet it moves so quickly from character to character that I was completely just kind of stunned by the power of it and how it just pulls you along into this difficult world. We're getting, it looks like a bunch of questions. I certainly have more questions I could ask you, but should we think about looking at some from the group?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, whenever you're ready. I would love to hear from people.
How should we do this? Should I just read the questions out loud, or am I able to put people?
That's a great question. Lauren, are you there? Do you
I've been unmuted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, Jonathan.
Hey, Jamie. I've been unmuted by Lauren, so I was going to ask. So you wrote wrote the two stories in the about the starlings years ago, and were there only two, I think? And then did you always know there was a bigger story to tell, or did they kind of pull you back in as you try to write other things?
Yeah, no, they always pull me back in. When I wrote the first Starling story, there was no plan for a second one. You know, the way they appear in the collection, there's the first one and the second one, Wake the Baby, and they look like they were always meant to be together. But that had never been the plan. I wrote those about 3 years apart, and then I thought I was done with the characters, and then they keep bothering me until I write about them some more. So maybe there will be another Starling novel in the future. I don't know. I'm a little exhausted by them right now, so no time soon. But I could imagine somewhere down the line. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. Do we have other people being unmuted?
So I do have a question. Hi, Jamie. I know you know me. My question is if you had to go back and redo any part of the book to include something in the current state of the world, what would it be and why?
Well, that's a great question. That's John. That's my brother-in-law. Hi, John. Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I'm working on a piece about this right now, about kind of the difficulty of writing a timely novel. Another reason besides just my own just having trouble figuring out how novels work at first, another reason this novel took so long was because I kept wanting to make it of the moment. You know, I kept trying to somehow to capture the zeitgeist. But of course, the American moment changes now every week. You know, and one of the earliest drafts of this novel was meant to be a sort of compelling argument for gay marriage. And then when gay marriage was legalized happily in 2015, nobody needed that book anymore. The politics of the book originally concerned, you know, Obama versus McCain, and then Obama versus Romney. And then after the current president was elected, those presidents were way less interesting. And I had to talk about the current moment. So, you know, I kept trying to write a timely novel before I finally realized you can never catch up to the moment. I think there are novels of the moment, but you can rarely plan for them. Sometimes you just get lucky. So I finally planted the novel very firmly in 2018. So I don't think I really have any regrets about, you know, obviously it's important to address the pandemic. It's important to address this essential civil rights moment. But no, I think this novel is, at this point, it's a snapshot of like the first half of the Trump administration and what life looked like then, before, you know, when we knew things were getting worse, but not how bad they were going to get. And I'm content for it to be that, because I've given up trying to, you know, write timely books.
Oh, Jamie?
James. Hi, James.
Hi. Did you ever toy with the idea of writing 6 first-person narratives rather than the limited third?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so early drafts of the book, the voices were all over the place. Some of the, because I kind of wrote the chapters just the way they came out. So some of the chapters were in first person. There was a second person chapter. The book was all in past tense. And again, it just became a thing where, you know, readers tend to appreciate a really clean, straightforward narrative with a reliable set of narration. And so I just felt like there are novels that do that well. I wasn't doing it particularly well, and I was just trying to show off. And so the best mode for this novel, we finally decided, was, you know, present tense with, you know, these sort of rotating limited thirds.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi, how are you?
Fine. You have a lot of followers in Argentina.
Thank you.
There are some here. I wanted to ask you something about the process of writing. While you were writing this novel, did you read any other novel about families, other authors to inspire?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, there's so many. I'm trying to think what the best ones to talk about would be. I was, you know, when it came to one book that really influenced me, I've already talked about a little, but Michael Cunningham. I mean, everyone loves The Hours, and I think it's his masterpiece. But I'm just a real big fan of this kind of dark horse favorite of his, which is By Nightfall. It's a book that I think everyone should read. The way that he uses point of view and the way that he dissects this marriage and this relationship between a husband and a wife and the wife's brother, it's just one of the most gorgeous things I've ever seen. And it's dealing with complexity and sexuality in this fascinating way. So I love that book, and I had to force myself to stop reading it because I was afraid that it was going to become too much of an influence, you know, and there's this anxiety of influence. So I didn't want to feel like I was you know, copying Cunningham. So that book really, that was special to me.
Can you repeat the author, please?
Yeah, Michael Cunningham, and the novel is called By Nightfall. But yeah, that's one that stayed with me a lot. You know, I know it might be a less popular opinion at the moment, but I did really, I loved Jonathan Franzen's The Corrections. And the one thing about that novel, though, that I always felt like if his 5 or 6 points of view, if he had kind of chopped them up and interwoven them, the book might have been more interesting than basically kind of giving us 5 or 6 novellas in a row. And so that was kind of my goal, was to, if I was going to tell a big family story, it was not going to be, you know, here's one son's section, here's another, but to just weave them all in and out with shorter chapters, so that you know, keep going back and forth between all the characters. So yeah, I definitely look to both of those books as models for sure.
Well, thank you very much. We don't have Lake Life yet. We look forward to receiving it.
Thank you. Yeah, next year at Hassa, Argentina. I hope next year.
Oh, okay. We'll wait for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jamie. Suzanne Van Atten here.
Hi, Suzanne.
One of the things I loved about the book was the bird motif throughout. The name of the family is Starling. Lisa studies birds. Marco paints birds. And I had forgotten until you just read chapter 1 that the child is chasing a bird when he falls. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks. I wish I had a sophisticated answer for you. I think I just like birds. Like, I really do. I had parakeets as a kid, and I had all these bird stuffed animals, and I just love bird watching. I'm not a professional bird watcher at all, but I do have binoculars. And you know, originally the characters had been named the Starlings in the first stories. So the choice to then make Lisa an ornithologist years later out of the Cornell labs, I worried it was a little forced. I'm like, can you really have someone who is an ornithologist with the last name Starling? And I was like, it's a novel. Like Dickens wouldn't have had a problem with it. So I just gave myself permission to kind of have fun with that. But yeah, I don't think I realized until later in the writing process how many things pop up again. There's a lot of birds in the book. There's a lot of music, a lot of songs named. And I think it's just because the things I like keep finding their ways into the book. Also, I noticed that on my last read through, there's an inordinate number of coffee cups and people drinking coffee throughout the book. And I think it's because I drink coffee while I write. And so I think through osmosis, these things just find their way into the book.
Thank you.
But no, thank you. And thank you for your beautiful AJC review. That made my month.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Nope. Hey there, Mr. Poissant. How are you doing?
Oh, Dylan, it's so good to see you. Dylan was my high school student 15 years ago.
Yeah, I have my whole family here. It's my son, Randy.
Oh my gosh. Hi.
So I actually had a really provoking question when I just looking at the cover and reading some of the description in it. I haven't had a chance to read it obviously yet because I had to work today, working from home. So much fun. But when you think about some of the artists that you've read and how they've impacted you, do you think any authors have really unconsciously helped you write this book? For instance, Virginia Woolf and, sorry, my son was stabbing me with a fork. Because I think that those are some of the interesting things is when you look back after you read what you wrote, is you can say, oh man, this artist or this author really inspired me to think along these lines. So that's really my question to you.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I think so there were earlier drafts of this novel were much longer. At one point, the novel was about 550 pages. And I think it's because I did think of it as kind of a Virginia Woolf type book or a Sebald book. I love books where almost nothing happens. Like I can be perfectly content where a character is just walking around, looking at nature, watching a plane write fudge in the sky, doing all sorts of nothing. I'm happy that way, but most readers aren't. And so there were earlier baggier drafts of the book where, the chapters were almost claustrophobic, being stuck in the characters' heads while they thought about life or just observed the world around them. And then the more I revised, I just decided to get down to that, I think what is Jake meaner version of the story, and just see how this would feel if it were, a more concise, compressed novel. So yeah, I definitely love those longer books myself, but somehow this just didn't turn into one.
Oh, hi, Jamie.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, because you've mentioned a few times, kind of what you want to read or what you enjoy reading, as opposed to what, the general reading public may want. How do you kind of balance that, just going out and writing the perfect book for Jamie versus going out and writing a book that you feel like could get published, or if you think those are necessarily two different things?
Yeah, no, great question. No, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I mean, I did not make any concessions on the novel. This is absolutely the book I wanted it to be, and hopefully it's one that readers will also like. I think maybe there will be one of those books in the future. I might have a longer Sebaldian person wandering around a town and thinking about life. I love those kind of books, but I think the reason this novel didn't turn into that was because it wasn't that kind of a book. It wasn't a single person. It was 6 people, and there was a lot of plot. And so trying to make it be both a novel in these characters' heads where stuff is happening, I was trying to have it both ways. But for this project, the way it turned out, the shorter chapters, the alternating viewpoints, I think was the best choice for the book. So, but yeah, you know, I think that a writer should definitely write whatever they feel they need to write and feel led to write. I don't think you should, you know, just write for a market particularly. You know, I think there are readers for every market, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm speaking of the market. I noticed that the reviewer who wrote you that great review asked a question. I think it was that same review that said you're one of the best Southern writers currently working. I guess I'm thinking about how you respond to the idea of yourself as a Southern writer. Is that something that you identify with in kind of an active way when you're writing? Does that feel true to you as a writer?
I think so. I mean, I don't know. I've lived everywhere. I was born in New York. I went to school in Arizona. I lived in Ohio for a while, but I mostly grew up in Georgia, and now I've lived for 9 years in Florida. Although, is Florida the South? I don't know. I don't know what we are in Orlando. We're just our own thing. No one knows what we are. But you know, it's definitely not a label that bothers me. And I did spend for the bulk of my sort of education reading Southern writers. You know, I grew up in Flannery O'Connor country, fell in love with her work early on. So that kind of fascination with the Southern Gothic has always been there. And then after college, for just years before I was writing, while I was reading, I devoured, I think, every volume of Algonquin Books' New Stories from the South. And that's where I discovered so many writers who many of whom I now count as friends, but whose work I admire. You know, Ron Rash and Jill McCorkle and Lee Smith, ZZ Packer, Holly Goddard Jones, just so many people that I think I'm profoundly affected by Southern work because I grew up in Georgia and I know the South, or I think I do. I mean, there's many Souths, you know, but yeah. So if I'm part of that tradition, then I'm totally happy to accept that.
Yeah, I mean, the book feels like it has a Southern sensibility to me, even though people sometimes think of Southern writing just as being like the ma and pa and right, kind of like out on the farm. It's obviously it's a much more sort of like suburban take on it. I thought that came through as well in the title, which I know is a title that you came to kind of late in the process. It looks like we've been going for a little over an hour. If anyone has any questions, this would be a good time to sneak them in, or we can wrap up depending on how Jamie's feeling.
I'm feeling great. Let's do a few more. I mean, people, if you're done, I understand. It's been an hour. Please leave if you want. But I'm happy to stay here. Yeah, and answer more questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, Jamie.
Hey, hi, Mark.
How are you?
Good. Was it Rope Walk, right?
Rope Walk. Taos Summer Writers Conference.
Oh, Taos. Yes.
Yeah, thanks. So I was wondering, now that you've written a novel, if your editors want you to stop writing short stories. Because some editors feel like that's graduating, right? Like now you're big time, you're going to write big novels, you're going to sell a lot more because short stories don't sell, and you're going to have books, and then they're going to be movies, and then you're going to be big. So don't write any more short stories unless they're for a magazine once in a while.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm laughing because I'm pretty sure my agent and editor are watching this. So I don't know. We haven't had that conversation yet. I mean, I'll always write stories for magazines, you know, whether they appear in book form, you know, soon or not. I don't know. That discussion still has to be had, but I love, you know, the short story was my first love, and I'll definitely always write them. But what's interesting is when I began the novel in 2010 until 2011, and I did kind of begin with the wrong attitude. It was kind of a mercenary move to write the novel to sell the collection, right? That happens a lot with story writers. But quickly along the way, I really fell in love with it. And now that I've finished the novel, I'd like to think, at least I hope, that I'm as much a novelist as a story writer. So I'm really excited about the stuff I'm working on now, and I definitely want to keep writing novels and stories. So hopefully it'll be both for the foreseeable
I'm
future.
glad to hear that answer. And also, if I may, just one quick related question. Was there any point in time during the writing of the novel that you wanted to, like you had the impulse to flee back to the safe confines of the
No, not to flee, but I did definitely, I wrote a number of stories over the years that I wrote the novel, and I don't think of it as fleeing as much as kind of release valves, you know, because you're working on this big Southern family drama, this very realist book for a long time. It can be really nice to just, you know, sit down and write a quick short story about a minotaur. and that becomes a really fun way to escape the kind of relentless living with the same family for years on end. So yeah, I think they both work well. I mean, I know there are definitely writers who need to work on the same project and nothing else straightforward, but I like to leapfrog and work on a couple of things at the same time, the same way I like to read a bunch of books all at the same time.
Okay, we have time for about one more question, and
Okay, great.
then it's almost time for us to go.
So who is it going to be?
It's Trevor. Can you hear me?
Trevor. Hey.
Fix it. How are you?
Good, good.
Good. So my question is about process. So when you approach a session and you're looking at, I think it was Vonnegut talked about, it might be an oversimplification, but bashers and swooshers, you know, just how you craft such sentences that are powerful and effective. They're so meticulously done. How do you balance that with also making sure that you're producing a steady rate of content? Does that make sense? Like, so as you go about it in your first drafts, are you mainly just trying to get aiming for a certain trajectory in terms of where you're going with the development of the plot and the action, or are you just kind of more intuitively working on making sure each sentence really sings before you, or is it more of a hybrid of those two?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I with the short story form, I usually give myself the luxury of not moving on to a sentence until I'm happy with the sentence I've written. But with a novel, trying to do that, you know, I learned the lesson early on. There's no point in polishing every sentence because you might wind up throwing 100 pages away while you're figuring out the novel. So for me, with the novel, the polish came later. You know, I let the thing balloon up to 550 pages, and then I worked on tightening sentences, because otherwise, you know, you might never reach the ending. Yeah. So I don't think I can't write the same way for both forms.
Okay, everybody. Let's see here. So we're still working on trying to filter through your questions. I'm sorry to say, I think we're almost out of time, but maybe later we can get you more answers from Jamie's personal phone number, which I will email everybody who is here.
How about, let's not do that, but yeah, if you're able to, are you able to screenshot or copy the questions down? Okay, yeah. So if you'll send me the text of the questions, I can definitely email people and reach out to people after this for sure. But yeah, so I don't even know what to say here. This was such a long time coming. I can't believe we were this one for over an hour. I feel like we were talking for like 5 minutes. Yeah, someone was asking, can we take a picture? Is there a way to? I think this is being recorded, right? Okay, awesome. So yeah, but I just want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank Writer's Block Bookstore out of Orlando for being our indie and for hosting this. If you want a signed copy of the book, you can get those from Writer's Block. They have a 10% off coupon, I believe, that's still available. Yeah, if you put in coupon code LakeLife, one word, no space, you can get a discount. Those are all signed. And yeah, if you want a personalized copy, just let them know that in the note. I'm going to be going back into the store tomorrow or Thursday to personalize books for anyone who wants that. And then, of course, thank you, Jake, my wonderful interviewer, my friend, thank you for reading this novel so carefully. Yeah, and thank you all for being here. This surpassed my wildest expectations. I was sad about there not being a regular launch, but doing it this way with so many people getting to come from all over the country and the world, it was even more special. And most importantly, we're keeping people safe during this difficult time, and that was really important to me. So thank you all. I love seeing all your faces, and this was just the best night ever. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And like Jamie said, we will have signed copies available at writersblockbookstore.com. Hope everybody has a good night, and you can see us once again, maybe. Certainly, we'll have an Instagram post for our post-successful event tomorrow featuring Jamie. And have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.